I always thought I had everything figured out. Rachel and I had been married for over 4 years and everything seemed perfect. Our life was simple, just the two of us, no children, no complications. We lived in a quiet suburban home, had steady jobs, and shared a love that felt unshakable. We were comfortable with each other, and trust had always been the foundation of our marriage. We didn't need grand gestures or constant validation. We were happy. At least that's what I thought. It started slowly, these small, insignificant changes that didn't seem like much at first. Rachel began working late more often, always claiming it was due to the pressures of her job. Her hours at the office seemed to stretch longer, and she'd come home with a look in her eyes that I couldn't place. It wasn't sadness or exhaustion. It was something else. But I convinced myself it was just stress. We had been through busy times before and it was nothing new. But then came the nights she came home late without any explanation at all. I had to finish some paperwork, she'd say, brushing off my concern with a quick kiss on the cheek. But I noticed the pattern. The days she worked late seemed to overlap with the days I found myself walking into our house, only to see her locking herself in the bathroom. Her phone was always with her, and I caught brief, nervous glances when I would unknowingly walk into the room. I couldn't explain why, but I had an unsettling feeling in my gut. One evening, I returned home earlier than usual. I walked into the kitchen and found Rachel sitting at the table, staring at her phone with an intensity one hadn't seen before. As soon as she heard me, she snapped the phone shut and hastily pushed it into her bag. Her face went pale and she avoided my eyes. I felt a chill in the air, but I said nothing. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, just work stuff," she replied quickly, a little too quickly. She avoided my gaze, and that was when I started wondering, what was she hiding? The questions started to pile up in my mind and I couldn't ignore them any longer. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking. But something in her behavior didn't sit right. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't just let it go either. I began keeping track of the little things, when she came home late, what she said, and even the time she wouldn't let me touch her phone. It was subtle at first. It was like she was pulling away from me in tiny, unnoticed increments. Yet every time I confronted her, she assured me there was nothing to worry about. But I started to see things that didn't add up. Rachel had always been careful with our finances, organized and meticulous. But recently, I noticed discrepancies in our bank account. A couple of unexpected purchases, things we didn't need, along with larger than usual deposits that didn't make sense. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but I knew enough to recognize that something was off. I kept quiet, but the unease was growing inside me, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I observed, the clearer it became. Rachel was hiding something from me. I decided to watch and wait, hoping to find an explanation before I made any accusations. Then one day everything changed. Rachel left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter while she ran upstairs to grab something. Normally, I would have respected her privacy, but that day I couldn't help myself. My curiosity got the better of me and I picked up her phone. My heart raced as I unlocked it, unsure of what I was going to find. What I discovered was a trail of deleted messages from a man named Mark Johnson. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the texts. They were flirtatious, intimate, and, worst of all, full of promises that should have been between Rachel and me. The words were undeniable. Rachel was having an affair. The shock of it hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt dizzy, like the ground beneath me had shifted. This couldn't be happening. My mind raced as I pieced together what I had just read. Rachel had been seeing Mark behind my back. The lies, the late nights, the unexplained purchases, all of it suddenly made sense. I didn't know what to do. My mind was spinning and for a moment I felt paralyzed. But then something inside me snapped. I had to know more. I had to find out how deep this went. I couldn't let Rachel continue to deceive me, not without understanding what was really going on. I confronted her that night. She came home late again and I was waiting for her, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my voice cold and firm. She froze in the doorway, sensing the change in my tone. Her face went pale. "I know about Mark," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Rachel's eyes widened in shock and then she tried to play it off. "David, it's not what you think." "Don't lie to me," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I know everything." She stood there speechless. For the first time I saw her vulnerable, unsure of what to say. And in that moment I knew the truth. Everything had been a lie. I had no idea where this was headed, but I was certain of one thing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. There was something bigger, something I didn't yet understand. And I was going to find out the truth no matter how far it took me. The conversation that night was a blur. Rachel tried to deny everything at first, but the more I pressed her, the more cracks appeared in her story. She confessed, though not entirely. It was clear she had been seeing Mark for months, but she refused to give me the full details. Her excuses were thin and desperate, and I could feel the walls of our marriage crumbling with every word she said. "David, please just listen," she begged, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you. Just happened. Mark and I have been friends for a long time and things got complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, disbelief settling in my voice. "Rachel, you've been lying to me for months. I've watched you change and I had no idea why. You've been spending all this time with him while I've been here, alone, wondering where you were. I deserve the truth." She hesitated, clearly torn between confessing everything and keeping her lies intact. But she finally gave in, the reality of our broken marriage hitting her hard. "It started as a friendship," she said softly, "but then it turned into something more. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now I don't know what to do. I didn't know how to tell you." My mind was reeling. It wasn't just an affair. It was the betrayal of everything I thought I knew about her, about us. The trust we built, the quiet understanding we shared, all of it shattered in a matter of minutes. But even as she spoke, I felt the anger rising within me. It wasn't just the affair that hurt, it was the lies, the secret life she had been living behind my back. The woman I thought I knew so well had become a stranger in a matter of months. But there was something else I hadn't yet discovered. Something that didn't sit right in my gut. This was more than just infidelity. Over the next few days, I began to piece together the puzzle. The discrepancies in our finances, the late nights, the unexplained deposits, and now the affair, all of it felt too calculated. I started thinking back to everything Rachel had said, the little details that seemed innocent at the time but now seemed suspicious. She had always been so careful with money, so organized with our bills. So why had she suddenly started acting reckless with our finances? Why had she been so evasive about her spending? That's when it hit me. Rachel wasn't just having an affair. She was using it, using me, using our marriage for something more. I wasn't just dealing with a wife who had cheated. I was dealing with someone who had planned this, who had orchestrated this whole situation to her advantage. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Rachel was looking for a way to secure financial gain, and she had been using Mark to manipulate me. But how? What was she planning? It wasn't until I started digging into our financials that I found the next clue. In our joint account, there were large, unexplained deposits, some of them originating from Rachel's work account. At first, I thought it was some sort of mistake, but then I saw the pattern. These deposits didn't add up, and they didn't match any of the things we had discussed. It wasn't just that Rachel had been spending money behind my back, she had been receiving money too. And I couldn't ignore the possibility that this money wasn't coming from her salary. I spent hours looking over the details, tracing the accounts, and then something else caught my eye. An unfamiliar name appeared in our transaction history, someone I didn't recognize. The name was Mark Johnson, the man Rachel had been seeing. I knew right then that I was dealing with something far more sinister than just an affair. This wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation at the highest level. I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. Rachel wasn't just having an affair for emotional reasons. She was using me, using our marriage to gain control over my finances. She had been using her relationship with Mark, a man with connections in the legal world, to orchestrate a plan that would allow her to take everything from me. The more I uncovered, the more my blood boiled. Rachel had been planning this for months, maybe longer. She had known exactly what she was doing, and she had been playing a dangerous game. But what was her end game? What was she really after? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The first step was clear. I couldn't rely on Rachel to tell me the truth. I needed to dig deeper, investigate on my own. But where would I start? I couldn't go to the police, at least not yet. I needed more than just suspicion. I needed solid evidence. That's when I reached out to Vanessa Davis, Mark's wife. If anyone knew the truth about what was going on, it was her. I didn't know how she would react. After all, she was probably just as heartbroken as I was, but I had to take a chance. I sent her a message, a simple line asking if we could talk. No details, just a request for a conversation. The reply came hours later. "I know what you're going through. Let's meet. I have something to show you." I didn't know what I was getting into, but at that moment, Vanessa seemed like my only hope of finding the truth. The meeting with Vanessa was set for the next day. I had no idea what to expect. Would she be angry? Would she blame me for what had happened between Rachel and Mark? I didn't know if I was ready for her anger, but I had no choice. If I was going to get the answers I needed, I had to take the first step into the unknown. When I walked into the coffee shop where we'd agreed to meet, I saw her sitting by the window looking down at her phone. She looked tired, her eyes red from what I assumed had been a sleepless night. She looked like a woman who had been through hell, and the last thing I wanted to do was make it worse. I took a deep breath and approached her table. She looked up, her face hardening for a moment before softening. There was a silent understanding between us, an unspoken connection. We were both victims of the same person, trapped in the same web of lies. "David," Vanessa said quietly, motioning for me to sit down. "I've been waiting for this." "Thank you for meeting me," I replied, sitting across from her. "I know this must be hard. I don't know what I expected, but I need to understand. I need to know what Rachel's been up to. How deep does this go?" Vanessa hesitated, looking down at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was low, tinged with bitterness. "Mark and Rachel have been involved in something much bigger than just an affair. It's not just a betrayal between the two of you, it's a scam, a setup. I didn't know at first, but when I started digging into Mark's finances, I realized he had been using Rachel for more than just an affair. He's connected to some very powerful people, and they've been pulling strings for months, manipulating people like you and me." I leaned forward, trying to absorb what she was saying. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Vanessa took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "Rachel has been working with Mark on a scheme to manipulate divorce settlements. They're using people like us to secure big payouts. I don't know all the details, but I found evidence in Mark's email, a client list with your name on it. They've been planning this for months, David. The affair was just the beginning. Rachel's been using you to get her hands on your money, and Mark's been helping her every step of the way." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. This was about manipulation, about using people's emotions and vulnerabilities for financial gain. I had been a pawn in their game and I hadn't even known it. "How do you know this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa opened her bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table in front of me. "I've been following Mark's movements, looking for any clue that could give me an idea of what he was really up to. These are emails, transaction records, and bank statements. They've been funneling money through Rachel's account, and they've set up a plan for her to take half of your assets once they file for divorce. But it's not just about you. They've been doing this with other clients, people who are vulnerable, people who don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And Rachel's been playing a central role in it all." I flipped through the paper she handed me, my mind spinning as I absorbed the details. The emails were clear. Rachel had been working with Mark to manipulate me into a vulnerable position. They had been planning this from the start, using the affair as a smokescreen while they executed their scheme. The money transfers, the secretive phone calls, the manipulated divorce settlements, it was all part of a much larger plan. "Vanessa, why are you helping me?" I asked, still processing everything. "I know you've been hurt by all this too, but why are you telling me this now?" Vanessa sighed, her face softening. "Because I can't let them get away with it. I was a fool, David. I trusted Mark just like you trusted Rachel. But I've learned the hard way that you can't trust people who use you for their own gain. I want to stop them from doing this to anyone else. I want them to pay for what they've done, and I want to make sure Rachel faces the consequences of her actions." I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, I wasn't alone. I had someone who understood, someone who was willing to help me expose the truth. But the road ahead was going to be long and dangerous. Rachel and Mark weren't going to back down easily. They had power, connections, and the money to make this all go away if they wanted to. But I couldn't just let them win. "How do we stop them?" I asked, my voice steady. Vanessa smiled, a small, determined smile. "We gather evidence. We expose their lies. And we take them down, piece by piece." I nodded, the weight of what I was about to do settling on my shoulders. This wasn't just about taking down a cheating wife. This was about taking down a system of corruption, about standing up for myself and for all the others who had been manipulated by people like Rachel and Mark. "We need to be careful," I said, my mind racing with possibilities. "I'm going to need more help. We can't do this alone." Vanessa agreed. "We'll need someone on the inside. Someone who can help us navigate the legal side of things. I know a lawyer who can help. Her name is Rita Caldwell. She's been involved in taking down some pretty shady people before, and she has connections that could make a difference." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's do it. Let's take them down." The road ahead was going to be difficult, but for the first time I felt like I had a chance to get justice. I wasn't going to let Rachel and Mark get away with what they'd done. I was going to expose them no matter what it took. The days following my meeting with Vanessa were filled with a sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks I had a plan, a direction. But the weight of what I was about to do was heavy. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Rachel and Mark weren't just playing with my heart, they were playing with my future. And the worst part was, they had been doing it for so long with no regard for the damage they caused. Vanessa had told me about Rita Caldwell, the lawyer she trusted. It wasn't long before I reached out to her. Her reputation as a no-nonsense attorney was well known, and from the moment I spoke with her, I could tell she wasn't someone who would back down from a fight. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Rita was sharp, confident, and not afraid to speak her mind. The moment she sat down, she wasted no time. "David, I've seen situations like this before," she said, her voice low but firm. "People get greedy, they think they can pull one over on the system, and they end up hurting a lot of innocent people along the way. Rachel and Mark have crossed a line. And if you're willing to do what it takes, we'll expose them for what they are." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. "I'm ready. I just want to end this. I want to make sure they don't hurt anyone else." Rita didn't sugarcoat things. "We'll need solid evidence. Proof that Rachel and Mark have been using you, manipulating the system, and defrauding you out of what's rightfully yours. If we don't have that, we won't be able to move forward." "I have evidence," I said, pulling the folder Vanessa had given me from my bag. I slid it across the table to Rita. "Emails, financial records, and transaction details. Everything I've uncovered so far." Rita looked through the documents carefully, her eyes narrowing as she read. "This is a good start. But we need more. We need to tie everything together. Prove that this wasn't just an affair but a calculated plan to exploit you for financial gain." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. This was bigger than I thought. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity, I was fighting to expose a network of corruption, something much darker than I had ever imagined. "Do you have any leads? Anyone else who might have information?" Rita asked. I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Vanessa. She's been digging into Mark's finances too, and she's found some things that might be useful. I'm meeting her again tomorrow to see what else she's uncovered." Rita nodded, clearly impressed. "Good. Keep me updated. We'll need all the help we can get." The next few days felt like a whirlwind. I spent my time compiling every piece of evidence I could find, carefully going over the financial records, the emails, and the transactions that tied Rachel and Mark together. But I knew it wasn't enough. I needed more, a confession, an undeniable piece of the puzzle that would make everything clear. I met with Vanessa the following afternoon. She was as determined as ever, but I could see the toll this was taking on her. She was living with the same betrayal I was, but she was also using it as fuel to fight back. "I've got something," Vanessa said, her voice low but steady. "I managed to get access to Mark's phone records. There's a trail of calls between him and Rachel, calls that coincide with every major deposit made into her account. I think they were planning this from the start, David. They were using her to get close to you, to manipulate you, and then they were going to take everything you had." My heart raced. This was the break we needed. With this, we could connect the dots. I knew that if we could prove that Rachel and Mark had been in constant communication while orchestrating this plan, it would be enough to expose them for what they were. "This is it," I said, feeling a sense of resolve. "This is the piece that will bring them down." Vanessa handed me the phone records and I could see the pattern emerge. Calls at odd hours, long conversations, some of them lasting for hours. It was clear that Mark and Rachel weren't just having an affair. They were coordinating a financial scheme, and I had been the unwitting target. I called Rita immediately to share the news. She was pleased, but she also reminded me that this was just the beginning. "You've got the evidence, but now we need to make sure we have everything tied up. We need to be careful how we approach this. Rachel and Mark are going to fight back, and they'll stop at nothing to keep their plan hidden," Rita warned. I felt a chill down my spine. The realization of what I was up against hit me harder than ever. Rachel wasn't just some unfaithful wife. She was part of something far more dangerous, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. Over the next week, I continued to meet with Rita, Vanessa, and my other contacts. We built our case, compiling every shred of evidence we could find. But the closer we got to the truth, the more I realized how high the stakes were. This wasn't just about winning a divorce. This was about exposing a dangerous network, one that had been manipulating people for years. One night, as I sat alone in my office, going over the evidence one last time, I received a call from Vanessa. "David, something's happening. Mark's trying to cover his tracks." "I think they know we're getting close," she said, her voice tense. "I just got a message from someone inside his firm. They're making moves and we have to act fast." My heart skipped a beat. I knew then that the storm was coming. Rachel and Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. But neither would I. "Get ready, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady. "We're about to take them down." The intensity of the situation had escalated. It felt like everything was happening too quickly, and yet I couldn't afford to hesitate. Rachel and Mark were cornered now, and they would stop at nothing to protect themselves. But we had them: solid evidence, records, and the testimony of Vanessa. We had everything we needed to take them down. The problem was they knew it too. And the longer I waited to make my move, the more time they had to cover their tracks. The message from Vanessa about Mark making moves sent a cold wave through me. It was one thing to suspect that Rachel and Mark were planning their next steps, but it was another thing entirely to know they were already putting those plans into action. They were preparing to fight back, and I couldn't let them take me down with them. Rita had already advised me to stay calm, to avoid making any rash moves. "If you go in too aggressively, they'll fight back harder. You need to be strategic, David. Wait for the right moment. We'll hit them when they least expect it." I hated waiting. I hated being at the mercy of people who had already hurt me so deeply. But Rita was right. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I needed to outsmart them, not just outfight them. The following days were tense. I spent time at home, making sure to stay out of Rachel's way as much as possible. She was still acting as though everything was normal, as though nothing had changed. She hadn't confronted me about the evidence I had, and I was starting to wonder if she was scared or just pretending everything was fine. But there were times when I saw it: the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the nervous glances, the way she locked her phone whenever I walked into the room. She was still lying, still hiding something. And I knew that at any moment she could turn on me and make her move. Vanessa called me one afternoon with some unsettling news. "David, I think they're getting desperate. I just overheard Mark talking about securing the settlement and closing the deal. I think they're going to try and rush the divorce. We need to act fast. If they file before we expose them, it'll be harder to fight." The urgency in her voice pushed me into action. We had to move now before Rachel and Mark had a chance to pull the rug out from under us. I called Rita immediately. "We can't wait any longer. It's time to make our move." Rita agreed. "I've already been in contact with some contacts at the courthouse. If we move now, we can make sure the papers are filed before they have a chance to submit their version. We'll have the leverage we need to force them to come clean." It was a delicate operation. If I wasn't careful, Rachel and Mark would retaliate and I could lose everything. But I was tired of being the victim. It was time to turn the tables. We worked through the night, pulling together all the evidence: emails, bank transactions, phone records, and getting it ready for submission. With Rita's connections, we managed to get an emergency meeting with the judge handling our case. We were going to present everything we had. This was the moment of truth. The day of the court appearance was tense. I arrived early, dressed in a suit that felt too tight around my chest. I kept my head down, trying to stay focused. Vanessa was there with me, offering silent support. She had become an ally in this fight, and I knew I couldn't have gotten this far without her. Rita arrived just before the hearing, her expression determined but calm. She looked like she had been through dozens of battles like this, and that gave me some comfort. She pulled me aside before we entered the courtroom. "Remember, David," she said, her voice steady, "this is not about revenge. This is about getting the truth out there. You've been wronged, and it's time to make sure Rachel and Mark face the consequences of their actions. Keep your emotions in check." I nodded. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to let my emotions cloud my judgment now. When we entered the courtroom, Rachel was already there. She looked out of place, her usual confidence replaced with an anxious energy. She didn't look at me. Instead, her eyes were fixed on her lawyer, a high-priced attorney who had been working with her to ensure her financial future. She had no idea what was about to hit her. We sat down, and the judge called the session to order. Rita wasted no time. She stood and addressed the judge, presenting the evidence with precision and clarity. The room fell silent as she laid out the trail of manipulation, the fraudulent financial transactions, and the explicit messages between Rachel and Mark. It was airtight. There was no way to deny the truth now. Rachel's lawyer tried to intervene, but Rita was one step ahead. She had already anticipated their arguments, and she shut them down with each counterpoint. The evidence spoke for itself. As the judge looked over the documents, I saw Rachel's face fall. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by panic. Mark wasn't there, and I knew why. He had run, leaving Rachel to face the consequences alone. He had been the mastermind, and now he was abandoning her to take the fall. Finally, the judge spoke. "This court will take a short recess while I review the evidence presented. I will make my ruling shortly." As the room cleared, I sat in stunned silence. It was over. Rachel had been exposed. She had lost. But as I glanced over at her, I saw the broken woman she had become. She was no longer the confident, manipulative person she had been. She was just a woman facing the consequences of her own actions. The judge's decision would come soon, but in that moment I knew I had won. Rachel had been exposed for what she truly was, nothing more than a manipulator, a liar, and someone who thought she could get away with destroying lives for her own gain. The weight of it all settled over me. The fight wasn't over yet, but I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the judge left to review the evidence we had presented. I sat there, heart pounding, my mind racing through the events of the past few weeks. It felt like a blur now, each step I had taken to uncover Rachel and Mark's deceit, each piece of evidence that had brought me closer to this moment. But as I sat there, waiting for the judge's decision, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace wash over me. I had done everything I could. I had exposed the truth. Now the court would decide Rachel's fate. Vanessa sat beside me, her eyes focused ahead, but I could tell she was just as anxious as I was. We had both been through so much. Our lives had been torn apart by the people we loved most. But now we were on the verge of justice. After what felt like an eternity, the judge returned to the bench. The courtroom fell silent as the judge cleared his throat and began to speak. After reviewing the evidence presented by both parties, I find that the claims of fraudulent manipulation and financial deceit are substantiated. The evidence shows a clear pattern of intentional manipulation, and the actions of Mrs. Rachel Walker and Mr. Mark Johnson are both disturbing and unacceptable. I held my breath, the words sinking in. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Walker," the judge continued, turning his gaze to Rachel, "you have been found to have participated in a scheme to manipulate your spouse for personal financial gain, through the exploitation of marital assets and deceptive behavior. The court will consider this in the final ruling of the divorce proceedings, and further legal actions may be taken for the fraud committed." Rachel's face had drained of color. She sat there, unable to hide the shock and fear on her face. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered everything she had done, the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation. She had brought this upon herself. As for Mr. Mark Johnson, the judge continued, the evidence suggests he has played an integral role in this scheme, and the court will recommend further investigation into his actions. A bench warrant has been issued for his arrest, and he will be charged with fraud and conspiracy. The weight of the words hit me hard. Mark had run thinking he could escape. But the judge's decision made it clear that he wouldn't get away with it. He would be held accountable for his actions, just like Rachel. The judge turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Mr. Walker, your actions in bringing this matter to light have been commendable. You have exposed a system of deceit, and in doing so, you have not only protected yourself but also potentially prevented further harm to others. The court will take your cooperation into account as we finalize the divorce proceedings." I nodded, still processing the enormity of what had just happened. The judge's words felt like a victory, but it was a hollow one. It wasn't about winning. It was about exposing the truth, about holding Rachel and Mark accountable for what they had done. And I had done that. As the court session adjourned, I stood up, my legs weak beneath me. I had won, but there was still a long road ahead. The divorce wasn't final yet, and there would still be legal battles to fight, but the worst was over. Rachel's lies had been exposed, and the truth had come to light. Vanessa stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You did it, David. You did the right thing." I looked at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "We did it," I corrected her. "I couldn't have done it without you." Vanessa gave me a small smile in return. "You're stronger than you think. And you've got the strength to move forward. You don't have to carry this anymore." I nodded, feeling the weight of the past few months slowly begin to lift. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The nightmare that had been my life with Rachel was finally over. As we walked out of the courtroom together, I glanced over at Rachel one last time. She was sitting there, surrounded by her lawyer, her face a mask of defeat. I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. She had lost. And now I could finally start moving on with my life. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready for it. I had learned that true strength wasn't about holding on to the past or seeking revenge. It was about letting go, standing tall, and finding the courage to move forward. I had been betrayed, manipulated, and used, but I had survived. And now I was free.